gatherings and celebrations of the armistice and so on, and religious festivals, and just name it. All that contributed. But I still find it remarkable how fast a virus could spread all over the world just by air, because people have to breathe.
First of all, this is going to happen again. That's why it's so vital that in West Africa we bring this epidemic under control, because otherwise it will be a continuous social...
Professor Piotr, thank you very much for speaking with Καθημερινή, and I'd like to dive right in and ask you what your biggest fear is regarding the evolution of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hello, good to see you and all the readers and viewers. But I must say my biggest fears are actually one that has to do with the virus and one that has to do with societies. And the first one is that the virus will change so fundamentally, so mutates, that our vaccines will no longer be effective. That is a big fear I have. I think the chance is not very high, but it could happen. And then my other fear is that as societies, that we will become complacent. I understand people are fed up, including myself, that you can't have a social life and the economy is suffering and so on. But if we go to be relaxing too fast, we're going to have to pay a very high price in cost in human lives, basically.
Now, the EU is making preparations for potentially vaccine-resistant variants. How is that work going on the scientific level, on the regulatory level, but also on the production side? Is it moving fast enough?
There is an initiative with a Greek name, Hera. The wife of Zeus, I think, if I remember. I had a classic Greek for many years, so I can even read the Greek alphabet still. But so that we have an instrument, just as the United States have BARDA, and so that we can stimulate the development of these much-needed new vaccines. And it's not only investing in, research, but also having the companies on board. We had, chaired by the Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, 2 meetings with the CEOs of the companies that have been developing vaccines, from smaller one, biotech, to which is becoming big, of course, to the big one, GSK and so on, and Sanofi, Pfizer, J&J, to get the buy-in from all the companies to do it. And then also, your point about the regulatory affairs is very important, that we don't waste any time on bureaucracy that is not necessary. And so here the European Medicines Agency, which I think is really has done a great job, and that we're looking at, what are the criteria to approve a variation on the theme, because these are not going to be completely new vaccines. They just will be adapted to make sure that they work and that they're safe. And but that you don't have to go through a year of clinical trials. And we have a precedent for that, and that is the influenza vaccine. And so that is going very well, but now we must have the vaccines going through clinical trials soon. And I think that by, the winter, autumn, that there will be some, some of the second generation vaccines will be ready. The biggest challenge will be, as we've learned the hard way, will there be enough manufacturing? Will the supplies be there? Because that is something that many people, including myself, we had underestimated.
Let me revert for a moment to the current crop, the first generation of vaccines, and ask you, what is the state of our knowledge at this point about the extent to which they block transmission as well as disease? And what is our best guess about the duration of vaccine-induced immunity?
Excellent question. So in terms, what's very clear is that they are very effective against death, against severe disease, against being hospitalized. All of them that are on the market. So that's a good news, and that's why I think that what we will see after a while, that we may still have outbreaks of infection in Europe, but I think mortality will be very low. So that is very well established, even against some of the variants, the British variant, the South African variant. Most vaccines, I think, will be doing very well for the severe disease. And at the end of the day, I think the number one goal of vaccination is to make sure people don't die, people don't get severely ill and don't end up in the hospital. That would be a fantastic change. The next question is that do they also prevent transmission so that the virus is going to be eliminated after a while? Here, the answer is probably in most cases, but not every case. We still are waiting for, for data, and we're all looking very carefully at Israel, because Israel is the country with the highest rate of vaccination and has done very well. So they're following that, and also other studies. My guess, but I must say it's a guesstimate, it's not hard facts, so it will be at least half of the people will not be infectious anymore. The third question, very important, how long is it going to protect us? And that is, the jury is really still out. And you have scientific opinion saying, oh, only 6 months, and others say at least 3 years, and anything in between. I think it will be probably a mixed bag. On the one hand, we know that people over 70, I am 72, in general, that immunity from vaccination goes down much faster than for young, healthy adults. So that may be one factor, and that's important for COVID because we know that older people are the most vulnerable for severe disease and dying. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then another factor again is, will there be viruses popping up that the vaccine will not get under control? But I would say that here in the UK, the government has decided that in autumn, I guess in October or so, before the respiratory season comes up, the winter, that people will get a booster vaccine, but not clear yet whether this will be only for the most vulnerable, the older ones, or everybody. That is not so clear. But I would say my guess is that we're going to be protected for several years unless there is a really nasty variant coming up, and then we'll have to go for the second generation of vaccines.
Let me ask you another thing, which is, I guess, strongly related to the extent to which the vaccines block transmission. Is there a better sense today as to what percentage of the population or of the adult population has to be fully vaccinated to reach the goal of herd immunity?
Another very important question. And when you think of herd immunity, it's really the percentage of the population that has to be immune, so that basically the virus has not enough susceptible people to continue spread. And it will be made up of two groups in a way, people with natural immunity and people with vaccine-induced immunity. The consensus among scientists has been 70%, now with the British variant, maybe 80%. But to be honest...
That's 70% of the adult population?
Of the adult population, or some say of the total population, because children can also transmit even if they're rarely sick. I'm afraid it could be quite high, 80% or more. For me, it's an incentive to vaccinate as many people as possible, and we'll have to see them. It will also be a bit different in warm climate. It may be lower than in colder climate, because in the winter there's more transmission because people are in closed rooms and all that.
I wanted you to give us a sense of the path back towards normality in European countries, to the extent possible with approximate dates. How will this play out during the summer and autumn as we exit the cloud of the pandemic and revert to a significant extent to what we remember as normal life?
Yeah, the vaccination coverage will be probably the number one determinant of whether we can not go back to normal, but go forward to normal, I think, the new normal. And by the way, Greece is doing in Europe a good job in terms of not only the containment of the epidemic but also of vaccination. Or I'm not saying that because you're Greek, but it's based on facts. So that is something that
containment has been doing a little not so well recently. But
exactly, with vaccination now, so I think that when you look at the UK, of course, here the UK has done very badly in terms of deaths and so on. We are now at 126,000 deaths. It's one of the top in the world. But vaccination rollout, very good. It's 7 days a week, even on Easter Day. I mean, the Western Easter, about 100,000 people were vaccinated. So it's a military operation going well. And so here all adults should be vaccinated by the end of June. All adults over 18. But the rest of Europe is a bit behind. And so it'll be just coming maybe just a bit too late for the summer, when you look at it. Although I would say if you see, like for Greece, the estimates 57 or 78% of by the end of June. If that's, I mean, it really will already help in a big way. Also,
which translates as 69% of the adult population.
Yeah, exactly. So also with the weather being more outdoors and all that, so I think will be some degree of normality will be possible. However, we've seen from, for example, Chile in South America, which has a better immunization rate. They were very fast. At the moment, they're a big epidemic, and that is because they prematurely loosened up all the measures, and it's out of control.
I'm gonna make you look into the even foggier future, the medium term. Will COVID-19 become a feature of our lives like the flu is? But on the other hand, will the fear it currently causes dissipate as the combination of vaccines and antiviral drugs mean that otherwise healthy people will not be in danger from it?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable in thinking through where we go in the medium term. Because I think it's highly likely that we go to what we call in epidemiology an endemic type of situation with the virus will still be circulating, if only in children, for example, because wait until we vaccinate children, but we don't have vaccine yet, and that we then with the outbreaks, with seasonal outbreaks, and in the colder countries, probably more in the winter, like we have flu. I think indeed we will have more of a flu-like type of pattern. However, with low mortality, thanks to the vaccines. And then the big unknown factor is indeed, again, whether variants come up. Now, I think that the new virus variants, at the end of the day, will be limited in scope. Maybe there will be 3 or 4 or 5 or even 10 that are relevant, because viruses mutate all the time, but it's not so relevant for us humans. And then that we can then go to vaccines that incorporate the different variants. We know that for other vaccines, for influenza, we need to make one every year. But these vaccines are protected less than the vaccines against coronavirus. Not to say, I think that zero COVID is an illusion, because there's only one virus, that human virus, that has been eradicated, and that's smallpox.
Smallpox, right?
If you asked me a year ago, although exactly a year ago I was in the hospital, I was with COVID, I was on oxygen, so this is a very important week for me. I mean, kind of mentally, but I had thought that we would have by now better treatments and maybe not yet a vaccine, and it was the other way around. That's been quite disappointing, but antivirals, I think, will play a role. But what we've learned about COVID and by the infection is that it's far more complex than we thought. So in the beginning, you have viral infections, and the virus multiplies and invades all kinds of organs. And that's the acute phase. And then you go into a phase where it's actually the immune response that is determining the disease. And so the antiviral treatment should be given at the beginning, probably. And so ideally, we need something that is oral, that you can get in the, in the pharmacy. And once you don't feel well or so, or you have a test that's positive, you immediately take it before you get seriously ill. That's when this antiviral infection treatment will be the most appropriate and effective. If you give it too late, doesn't matter. There's not much virus. Then you need to come up with immunomodulators like dexamethasone.
You need to come up. How did you call them?
It's called immunomodulators. So it suppresses the immune response. So I think there's antivirals, but also then monoclonal antibodies. So that can be used. Yeah, I am optimistic, but probably there we'll need a cocktail. Because with variants, the monoclonal antibodies are very specific, and we already know that some variants that the monoclonals are not active against it. But if you give 3 different ones, then you have a broad spectrum cocktail. So that should work.
Now, I wanted to turn to an issue that is again in the news this week, and it relates to the safety of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yeah.
We have a briefing about it in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Should people have concerns about taking this vaccine? I mean, the cases are extremely rare. And are you concerned about the back and forth that we've seen by many national vaccination authorities, which, some people argue has increased instead of dampening the skepticism towards the vaccine?
No, it's a very difficult issue because it's, we'll wait. I mean, I'm also going to be very curious what the EMA has to say about it. But it seems now that in rare cases, the vaccine may cause this rare, thromboembolic event with thrombocytopenia and so on, which is very unusual. And that's, how to say, it's not unusual. I mean, yellow fever vaccine kills about 1 in a million people who get it, or maybe less. So I've had it, and every time I got this, because I travel a lot to Africa and so on. I mean, I had it 3 times because it's valid for 10 years or so. I was a bit worried, to be honest. So it's unavoidable. But I think it's not to say that it's still beneficial or cost beneficial. It's all every time about people. And that's why a very detailed analysis is very important. And for example, it seems that it is younger people. And
most women.
Yeah, so women. And women, for example, for this, I know women who take contraceptive, hormonal contraception are already more susceptible to embolic events. So it has to be taken very seriously. What is problematic is often that is if politicians are going to take decisions that should be basically be technical, but it becomes very complicated because of the what is the risk that we accept in society. This is a good vaccine that is has already saved lots of lives, I'm sure. It's rare, but it's real. And we need also to make sure that we have, that people know what are the first symptoms, the first signs, that it's, we had anaphylactic shocks with the Pfizer vaccine for a while. Okay, nobody died, and the vaccination centers, they know exactly, they're prepared for doing it. Something like that we should also have. Will it undermine confidence? That could be, because first some countries said AstraZeneca vaccine cannot be given above 55 or 65, and now they're saying it can only be given over 65. But it's for different reasons. The first one is because there were no published data, so I understand that. And now there are some data. So I understand that people are confused. And so I think we need to be totally transparent. I think that, and explain to people what it is. That if people think or have the feeling that you're hiding something, then that's a problem. And you can argue that the fact that these rare cases were detected is a sign that the monitoring of safety is working.
Would you not agree that the first dose strategy that the UK has followed has been vindicated? And shouldn't the EU member states also move more in that direction?
Well, I was critical of the decision, I must admit. I was always supportive for the AstraZeneca vaccine to have a longer interval between two doses, and that's for immunological reasons, and also because I worked with the Janssen Ebola vaccine, which is using the same platform adenovirus, and we compared 1 month interval with 2 months, I mean, to be exact, 28 days and 56 days, and 56 days was better. So I said, that's fine. However, on the Pfizer, BioNTech vaccine, Moderna, there are no data. And so I'm maybe a bit on the conservative side for this, that for something that is completely new, nobody has ever used the mRNA vaccine technology, that I would say, let's go for the maximum period that was included in the trials, and I think that's 8 weeks, if I remember well.
Now, let me ask you, you are an advisor to the President of the European Commission, and there's been huge debate about how well the EU did on the issue of vaccines and in tackling the pandemic in general. What would you say that the EU got most wrong in tackling the pandemic, and what did it get most right?
Let me start with what I think is a positive side. For me, the vaccine procurement, I think, was the right thing to do. Because I always, maybe because I'm a scientist, but I always try to say the counterfactual. If the Commission could have said, okay, health is not a competency of the Union, so it's not our problem. You do it as you want. Particularly for smaller member states and so on, some of them would have no vaccines at the moment, probably, or at very high cost. And so I think that strategy was correct. But I think that joint procurement and also was fair that it's by population, not whether you're the wealthy countries, their own. I mean, I think I'm very sensitive to that, having lived in Africa and so on, that you're not punished because you're a bit, you're not as wealthy as the others. You know, that's maybe in Greece you will also appreciate that. So that is, I think, a good thing. Second positive thing is that in the beginning, particularly, it was a cacophony. You know, as we say, there's a very every member state their own thing, and there were even exports bans on protective material. Borders were closed. Trucks were so that the Commission and the European Union, there was an agreement to do it together. What has not worked well, I think, is to start with the whereas the procurement of vaccines was there, then the probably not enough attention to the supply. Frankly, I think if AstraZeneca would have supplied all the vaccine that were under contract, the European Commission and Ursula von der Leyen would have been heroes, and now they're criticized. You know, this is so the not attention, enough attention, no having be ready. We were not ready for the supply issue. And then I think the member states were prepared in very different degrees. Some only started vaccinating sometime mid-January, when the vaccines were already there, I think the day before or after Christmas.
Looking at the even larger canvas at the WHO, and I wanted to ask you to briefly give me your sense of how well it has done during the pandemic, first of all in sounding the alarm, then in promoting equity in the access to diagnostics and treatments and vaccines, but also in the crucial issue of investigating the origins of the disease.
Yeah, I think on the alarm, let's put it this way, I've been very critical of WHO during the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, where it took months to sound the alarm. Here, it could have been faster, but I think they was okay. On the origins, I think that the mission to China, they've done probably as well as they could, but I didn't expect much out of it because one, you need luck to find the origin of it. For example, for Ebola, we still have not isolated the virus from a bat, where this probably is. And in China, they found for SARS in 2003 in a cave they found the virus. But here, the team, I'm not sure how many people spoke Chinese on this international team. I mean, I've been enough to China that if you don't speak Chinese and understand it well, I think you're missing a lot. I think on the equity issue, actually, it is an initiative that was launched by Ursula von der Leyen on the 4th of May now, because I was there. I mean, I was there virtually. You know, this COVAX, and then WHO has joined that later. But it's really, and it's now under their umbrella. But that, I think, is an initiative of the EU, and when you think of it, and all the initial negotiations were done by people from the Commission, and it's also the biggest contributor to this. However, it's not a matter of money because the vaccines are not there. This vaccine, the lack of equity in the world is one of the big geopolitical issues of our time for me. One, as a matter of a moral issue, you know, a matter of equity, but also as long as the problem is not solved everywhere, nobody is safe. There will be constant reimportation of cases. We can't go back to normal then. But also, when the virus is circulating on a large scale, this will be a breeding ground for variants that maybe create problems.
You have decades, more than 4 decades, in fact, of experience dealing with deadly infectious diseases, some harder to contain than others. What makes the novel coronavirus stand out, in your view? And why have we gone from a world in which your professor told you there is no future in studying infectious diseases to one where we are living through pandemics seemingly with increasing frequency?
Since 2014, I had a talk, are we ready for the next pandemic? This was inspired by the Ebola outbreak. And the answer was no. I mean, long talk, short answer. And we all knew, we virologists, that there would be an epidemic coming up. And what was the, you know, to say the worst scenario in a sense, respiratory transmission and high mortality. Because like Ebola, I was never concerned about. I mean, it's very bad if you have it because the mortality is so high, but you need very close contact to be infected. So it's not something you can catch on a bus or in a restaurant or whatever. So that's what makes it that it's so highly contagious and that also asymptomatic people can transmit it. You don't have to be, you know, it's like HIV also. I mean, there you need sex, but you can be perfectly healthy and you can transmit it. And let's not forget, HIV has now killed about 35 million people. We still don't have a vaccine. But here, that's what I was kind of, you know, that's what makes it such a big epidemic. But also the economic impact is enormous, the poverty that it generates in many countries. And also one thing that I had not foreseen was this, let's say, the nationalistic reflexes, you know, for my people first. On the other hand, I was naive, you know. It's for the future, and that's your second question there, is that we will undoubtedly have other epidemics. And the biggest fear is, of course, that it would be as transmissible as COVID, but more deadly. Or another nightmare scenario would be that we can't make a vaccine against it. That takes, like for HIV, we've been lucky that it works, you know, in the vaccine. So that's really, I think, a matter of luck, but also of decades of scientific investment that we could come up with it. So it is likely that we will go to what Tony Fauci and myself also we've called the era of pandemics. We will see more and more transmission from wild animals, but also from, you know, domesticated animals. We've also no longer living really in harmony with nature. Population drive, you know, when we had the Spanish flu 100 years ago, we were, what, 1.5 billion people on Earth, something like that. And now we're like, what, 7.7 billion or so. And then urbanization, the food chain. Before, when a farmer had a problem with his chickens, bad for the chickens who die and for the farmer, but now you have worldwide food chains that can also be a factor for spread of pathogens. And then, of course, mobility. What used to be a local problem can now very rapidly become a global problem. So that's why there's such a need for international collaboration within Europe, in the EU, that we need to work together, but not just in Europe. I mean, this outside, we have to be mindful that something that happened 5,000 kilometers from us or more, who had ever heard of Wuhan? I mean, I've been there, but very few people. And then now that everybody knows in the world it is. So we need to be on top of what's going on in the world, because it's truly becoming a global issue that requires very intense international collaboration. And that means openness, transparency of information, and sharing of also the tools to fight it, including sharing vaccines.